Okay, so the ear, right, converts sound waves, converts those pressure changes of different frequencies, different amplitudes, and different complexities into neuronal activity. And it does so by first capturing, sound waves, those pressure changes that are emanating off of something vibrating out here in the environment, capturing it with these wing-like protuberances, right, which we, typically call the ears, but these are actually, technically the pinna, the wings, Latin for wing, and this is a component of what we refer to as the outer ear. So the pinna, which have really interesting sort of whorls and shapes, etc., will actually capture and funnel down the pressure changes that are emanating from something vibrating, the sound waves, down into this canal that extends like about an inch in towards the skull, on either side. And in fact, I have a skull here. You can see where that, that those sound waves will go. The auditory canal actually will, work its way down through these very distinct holes. This is a hole right here called the auditory meatus. And that actually is where the auditory canal, your ear is attached out here, and the canal goes right down there to a flexible membrane that's located at the end that's called, famously, right, the eardrum. And it's also known as the tympanic membrane because, timpani is drumming. And the tympanic membrane, the sort of lateral aspect of it, the side of the tympanic membrane that's oriented to either side of the head like this, the side of the head, and the auditory canal and the pinna all comprise what we refer to as the outer ear. And then we transition, right, on the other side of the eardrum into what's called the middle ear. And the middle ear consists of the medial aspect of the the eardrum or the tympanic membrane, and then a series of small bones that are actually attached, to the tympanic membrane or eardrum at one end, and then they focus down into a tiny little point with the last bone onto a sort of oval window on the other side of the medial aspect of the middle ear that is going to poke at, this flexible membrane and move fluid inside a coiled spiral structure called the cochlea. The cochlea is what we call the inner ear, and the middle ear consists of the medial aspect of the tympanic membrane or eardrum, the three little bones that are going to connect that eardrum to the oval window that pokes, that allows it to poke the moving sound waves, against this flexible, oval window and move. We're going to see fluid and move a membrane inside the cochlea. But these three little bones that are in the middle ear are referred to as the ossicles collectively. But they consist of the malleus, which is the hammer, the incus, which is the anvil, and the smallest bone in our bodies, which is called the stapes, which looks like a little stirrup, and that's the one that's poking, back and forth with the movement, the mechanical movement of the drum that was initiated by the arrival of those sound waves down the auditory canal. So the cochlea we're going to see is the site of stimulus transduction, of the conversion of sound information ultimately into neuronal activity, via the movement we're going to see of a membrane upon which these very specialized cells, sensory neurons, afferents, sit, in particular a set called the inner hair cells. Now, the outer ear, basically captures sound waves. That's its function, right? The pinna capture the sound waves and focus it and drive it down the auditory canal, through the auditory meatus, which is the hole in the skull, down to the drum, the eardrum or the tympanic membrane, and again the lateral aspect of the tympanic membrane, the auditory canal and the pinna form the outer ear. Then the middle ear is the medial aspect of that drum, the three ossicles, and then the lateral aspect of the oval window, right, that is the entry sort of to the cochlea, fluid-filled cochlea. That's all part of the middle ear. And those three bones, those ossicles, they serve a very critical function in terms of amplifying the sound waves. They capture, for example, the essentially the sound wave information that the drum is generating by moving back and forth, right? That's a big, broad drum in comparison to the tiny little stapes, ossicle point, at the oval window poking at the cochlea. So it's gathering all of this sound wave information and then funneling it down and focusing it and heightening it in terms of the little back and forth poking. So it serves that middle ear as an amplifier, of the sound waves. There's another really important structure in the middle ear too. It's called the eustachian tube that we know about sometimes if we get an ear infection, right? Because that's where we try to get, sort of drainage out of it. If there's, bacterial infection or a viral infection in the, in the middle ear. People may have had middle ear infections. And the tube goes from the middle ear, to the kind of fusion area of the nasal cavity and the throat, right, or in the pharynx. We often try to do this to kind of open up that tube a little bit, like gain access so that air can equalize pressure across the membrane. Interestingly, the tubes that are put in ears, though, are not in your eustachian tube. If they put a tube in your ear because you have too much pressure in the middle ear because of some kind of an infection, they put it right through the eardrum, actually, to equalize pressure, over there, and ultimately those little tubes will fall out. But the middle ear is really critically important for amplifying sounds. It is our amplifier. And again, once the information reaches the cochlea, the cochlea is going to be the site of the specialized cells that'll transduce this sound information into neuronal response and start, transiting it back into the brain where we